Another world. Another time.
In the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Dea, Dera,
Your vital essence, the dark crystal.
Kida.
Come, see for yourself.
Aru, Garu.
How very interesting.
Dea. I feel the song of Thra in my heart. Now go, you heroes of Thra.
Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone. This is your vital essence on the Dark Crystal. I'm your host Philip, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning in as we got a very special guest for this episode of Trial by Stone. To give an introduction for this guest, Neil Sterenberg, who is the puppeteer behind many characters, including Rian and skekOk, the Scroll Keeper, just to name a few. But to give sort of his biography, for over 20 years, Neil Sterenberg has been producing puppets and puppetry for the UK television, commercial and film industry. He has had a hand involved in either making or performing many of the UK's well-loved TV puppets. He loves his job and the diversity of the characters he's performed. On one day he might be a talking biscuit, a very dull Furchester hotel guest, a speedy runner Bean, and the next an alpaca who's afraid of heights. More recently, however, his work can be seen as various creatures and droids in the latest Star Wars movies, and is proud to be the performer behind Rian and skekOk, the Scroll Keeper, in Netflix's The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. So Neil, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, that's all right, Phil. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, and it's just great to actually interview. I mean, yourself, as one of the main lead puppeteers behind the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. How's this past month and a bit been for you? Since the show's been coming out, and all the hard work that you've been working on the show for almost a good year or so. How's it been for yourself, just seeing the reactions or, your thoughts or anything with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance?
It was such a mammoth task when we made it. Nearly 11 months of very, very hard filming. And the one thing about when we were doing the Dark Crystal is it was packed full of surrealness, exhaustion. It was this strange show, and there were these revelations of things that would happen, and you go, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe we're doing that. Oh, we've done this. So, and you think that would end when we shot it. We thought, well, it can no longer hold any more surprises for me now. That was the Dark Crystal. That was incredible. Wow. I was thrown into a whirlwind and came out the other end alive. And you think that's the last that you will have of that sort of experience. And the show kind of all went to bed as they started editing, and it all started to went to quiet, and you start to gather your thoughts about it all. And then it starts to become weird again. The people start talking about it in the outside world, and you start to hear it, and you start to see it on your social media, and then it just starts to whip up this weirdness again. And what people post on social media and what you see, and the pictures and people talking about things that you were involved in, it's very much like suddenly that your weird day at the office is suddenly being talked about by lots and lots of people, and people are very kind, and they love the show, which is fantastic. And it also amazed me in the day that we live in now that all that 11 months of hard work is consumed within 10 hours.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
10 hours, it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know. I must admit, even when I watched the show, over the weekend, and I think I watched it within pretty much 2 days, it was a lot to take in, actually, watching it for the first time. So, but I mean, been watching it, multiple times has been just as enjoyable as seeing it the first time. Yeah.
There's a lot to see. There's a lot to take in, and it blows your mind when and inevitably we all want to watch the next episode. You're lured in. Oh, what happens? Can I resist the temptation of watching another one? No, I can't resist. Yeah, I know. Watch another.
I know. Can hold off waiting and just another day to watch the next episode? But yeah.
I'll stay up another hour. Oh, yeah. No.
So, like you said that, this show was pretty much, unlike any other puppet production for yourself. I guess we'll just chat about like how did you get into puppetry? Like, for example, how did you discover The Dark Crystal, the original film that started it all?
Well, I suppose the two are kind of intertwined. I've struggled to remember when I first watched The Dark Crystal. I can't remember whether my parents took me to the cinema or whether it would have been on hiring the video from the video shop. I can't remember. But as a small child, I was deeply influenced by, obviously, the work of Jim Henson and his company and the performers that surrounded him. And the Muppet Show was a big influence. As I slightly got older, Fraggle Rock was a huge influence on me. I loved the world building. I loved the fantastic characters, every character was different, within Fraggle Rock, and the beautiful humour within the Muppet Show and the lovely sentiment behind it all, behind the silliness too. And Dark Crystal was all intertwined, obviously, in all of that. But there was something about Dark Crystal that just was spellbinding. The whole world, the whole creation of that environment and the creatures within it, the intertwinedness of them, and just the absolute beauty of it. It is a work of art. It's a stunning piece of puppetry, and it was like nothing else. So as a small child, I was completely hooked into that, and the film has never really left me. And I would say it was one of the big influences, along with all the Muppet and Henson stuff that was happening, that made me want to do it as a career. And I remember probably about the age of 8-ish, you can buy this clay that you mould like plasticine, and then you put it in the oven and you bake it, and making tiny little skeksis, tie-dyeing all the fabric and making these little models because you couldn't get them. So, and just all that work sort of created. And I think what drove me was there's part of me that wanted to emulate that. There's part of me that wanted to understand how all that was done. So that started off my mind thinking about puppet, and that's what pulled me into puppets, the cleverness of it and the illusion and the tricks of it. Then drove me to want to be a puppeteer and a puppet maker. So the two are all sort of intertwined in this mush. My hobby that I loved and was my inspiration to my creativity, strangely now, on the other side of the Dark Crystal, in this incredible journey from the influence to being part of something that put you there in the first place. It's mind-boggling, really.
For yourself, it must have been, I guess, like just pretty much like a full circle kind of journey that you've had, from the early days of watching Dark Crystal, the Jim Henson productions, and then sort of, going from there to, where you are, with being involved in the Dark Crystal in that way. Yeah.
I can't get my head around it still now. And even more, when we did it, it was so intense, and it was almost like it almost feels like a bubble now. Like it's like now I'm on the other side of it, looking back on it retrospectively. It's I still can't believe it. I still can't understand it. I don't know how I got to be there.
Yeah.
I'm honoured and humbled that I was. It was just it's. I always think that you try to put back what you got out as a child, what influenced you and what fed your spirit. You want to put back in your adult life. People, doctors, nurses, artists. I think there's something that you want to put back, that inspiration, not whether it's a deliberate conscious thought, but I think if within your heart that's what you want to do, you want to give back. It's like a nurturing part of being a human being, I think. And it's been my privilege to do this. This influenced me, and it's in the position where I can hopefully put something back, and that's a great privilege in life.
Making just a big contribution, to Dark Crystal with your many characters that you perform, as Rian and skekOk and Tavra, and also Gruenak #2. So I love that the Gruenaks don't have a name. They're just, Gruenak 1 or 2. It's
There's only 2 of them, so really,
yes,
you think between come up with names. You be 1 and I'll be 2.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Yeah. Just so sorry. It just made me think of like the bananas and pajamas. I don't know if you ever had those.
Yeah,
with B1 and B2. G1 and G2. Yeah.
Such creativity.
Yeah. I guess, you've been doing puppeteering for such a long time, and which sort of led, into with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. I mean, how did it came about? Like when you first got involved, was it an audition process, or like how did it all went down for yourself?
I'd heard rumours that Dark Crystal might be happening, which was a big surprise to me. I was like, oh, really? Dark Crystal? Wow, that's interesting. And then I heard it was possibly going to be shot in the UK. I was like, oh, okay, I'd like to be part of that if that happened. Yeah, sounds really interesting. Yeah, keep me posted. Yeah. And then we got I can't remember if it was email or a phone call saying we're holding auditions. We're seeing every puppeteer, and we'd like you to come. Da, 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 da. Okay, yes, I'll come along to your audition. And my sort of preconception was, I thought, well, because often what happens when they do the Muppet films is that a lot of the American cast will come over, and the British puppeteers help support those and provide assistant roles, and we're very much second fiddle to the main players, obviously. And I'd never worked for Henson's up to this point. When I started early on in my career, I tried to get work at the Jim Henson Company because they used to have the Creature Shop in London, and I used to go and visit. And but it never happened. I never worked for them, so I thought, well, they don't know me. But it'd be lovely to go along, and we'll probably get to play some background characters, maybe, or we'll be doing handwork and assisting. And I thought, well, that's fine. And I thought it's very kind of them to humour us. Yes, yeah. And anyway, we turned up at the audition, and there was a script left for us because we didn't know anything before we went in. And I thought, oh, these are like character parts. Well, that's very kind of them to, but I don't think for a minute I'll be doing this. But okay, I'll read this. I'll do this for you. And I was that nervous because I'd never met Lisa Henson before, and Kevin Clash was there. And so I feel nervous now talking about it. I was like a bag of nerves. Anyway, I auditioned for Rian and the Chamberlain, and there were set pieces that I think they had everybody do. Anyway, it all seemed to go well, and they said, "Oh, well, we'd like you to come back tomorrow. Would you care to come back tomorrow?" And I'm like, yes. Of course. Well, actually, I've got a hair appointment.
Got something else going on.
So I turned up the next day, and that was a little bit more narrowed down in puppeteer terms. And then we had another day where we were all together. They'd whittled it down to a smaller group, and we all played and exchanged roles and tried different characters against other characters. And then that was it. We didn't hear anything for a long time. And that was the audition process. And I just sat there thinking, well, that was very nice.
And so, back then, even with the auditions, like they, you had scripts, or they had written up stuff for characters. So when you went in, like, did you, of course, you probably instantly recognized that, this was going to be some Dark Crystal project at the time, yeah?
Yeah, I had mock-ups of some of the puppets for us to audition with. They weren't finished. They weren't painted or anything. So it was quite a leap of imagination to see how they would finally look. But you got an idea. You got that was a Gelfling, and they had a mock-up of the Chamberlain with a loose sort of costume on it. So it was enough to feed your imagination. But reading the script for the audition, you did suddenly dawn on you. You went, this is quite serious. This is quite wordy, quite serious, because it was a heated. I think the scene was the scene where Rian's with his father in Stone in the Wood, where he's trying to convince his father of, I think it was, don't quote me on it, but so quite an intense scene that they chose for the audition.
Okay, yeah. So whether that was, probably, like a draft from, from episode 3. The show. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Yeah. And so, I guess once you got the call that we definitely want you in for the show, like, and all the these characters that you were going to play, like, what was running through your head at that time? Yeah.
Well, we'd had this very long period of time where we knew nothing was coming from Henson. The shoot was getting closer, so we were a little like, well, what is happening? And anyway, I was working on a film at the time, and I was working away from home, and I was sat in my hotel room one evening, and the phone went, and it was our puppet coordinators, and they said, "Are you sitting down?" Sort of feeling, and I was like, yeah. Well, we're phoning to tell you what part you have. Oh, okay. And they went, so you're going to be playing Rian.
Yeah.
And such Skeksis. Now, I didn't hear anything past the word Rian, because I went, oh, that's like one of the main roles.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's kind of, I know Rian isn't Jen, but I went, well, he's kind of the Jim Henson role within this new thing. And I could not get my breath. I couldn't get my head around it. I couldn't compute, A, that I was playing a role in the first place,
Yeah.
and B, that it should be this quite iconic role that you compare it with Jen. And I didn't really sleep that night.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember the Skeksis they said. I couldn't remember. I thought, and I really wanted to play a Skeksis. That was I can get to play a Skeksis, because I just thought they were fabulous characters. I thought, that would be the dream, to play a Skeksis. But I couldn't remember the Skeksis they said. All I could do was just Rian, and I couldn't compute it. I just couldn't.
But yeah, just a very overwhelming that, once you heard Rian, and then nothing else, and then I guess probably must have taken a bit of time when they're like, oh well, you're also going to be performing a Skeksis, which was probably just an extra bonus, Yeah,
that was like, but it's like having your cake and a big dollop of icing on top, and but yeah, I'd sort of sit there because I was on my own. I had and we weren't allowed to discuss it because obviously for confidentiality. I probably shouldn't be telling. No. But you'd sit there and then you'd sort of go, oh yeah, okay then, okay, yeah, I'm playing Rian. I'm playing Rian. It was like this circle of, really? No. Okay. Really? And not being able to discuss it was very, it doesn't help you contextualize it or work it out in your mind. So yeah, it was a bizarre, surreal moment, of which there were many from that time.
And I mean, they really kept the secret pretty good, actually. I mean, when they announced it in May in 2017, and of course, I mean, you would have had the auditions probably, prior to that, and yeah. I mean, that was such a I was just shocked and amazed, and just wow, Dark Crystal is coming back, and it was just like.
Well, I think it's like Christmas. It's like Christmas, isn't it? In the fact that, why would you want to spoil that joy on the child, your child's face on Christmas morning by them already knowing what's in the paper, and I think we all, out of respect for the film, and then for the fans and for the future audience, it was like, why would you want to spoil that beautiful moment? And we had a lot of people visit set, and I was always amazed that nothing got leaked. And I think it was just out of that respect for the show that people, no, we want to keep this watertight. We don't want anyone to know that it'd be a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing. Like, it was just, nothing got leaked out or anything like that. So it was just, I mean, kudos to Jim Henson Company. I guess, everyone who auditioned, and, everyone that sort of kept their lips sealed, I guess, during that time.
Yeah. We were all like Gruenaks.
Yeah. Yes, they're stitched up and
yeah, but what they don't tell you is all our mouths were stitched.
Yeah. and so I mean, once you sort of heard that you got on the roles and stuff, I mean, I guess the next step was, I guess, doing like a lot of rehearsals. I guess, I mean, how intensive was it to working, like having all the puppeteers, working together and trying to work out with, during rehearsals, like, with the Gelflings and Skeksis, and how it was all going to work, like, throughout the filming of the show?
We initially had the scripts come through, which was a big pile.
Yeah, especially for 10 episodes, yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of paper. So we we had all read that sort of before we turned up, and we had a 3-week rehearsal period, and within that period was the time also, so we read through. We were introduced to the puppets that we knew we'd been cast as, and then there were some parts that weren't quite cemented. We didn't quite know who was. So it was almost like a second audition where we would we'd workshop other characters, and they sort of got divvied between the 12 core puppeteers. And it was a time, because all the puppets were made in America, so they'd all been brought over to the UK. And it was a case of tweaking those, getting used to the animatronics in them, testing everything out, making sure they were comfortable. I had one version of Rian.
Yeah.
They weren't very happy with his face. They were happy with it, but they wanted to make some changes. So I had a rough Rian to work with for some time. So it was getting used to all of that stuff. And we would rehearse scenes on camera, and we'd work with Louis and Lisa, finding those characters. And so it was a bit of a workshoppy, rehearsey, camera testy kind of time, and sort of getting aware of the enormity of what we were about to take on. I mean, there was a trepidation in the air that, this is going to be quite a thing to pull off, but we were all full of enthusiasm.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess with a lot of puppet productions that, most cameras are all either pretty static or, very little to no movement. So I guess, coming in, with Age of Resistance, and I guess probably once you heard of it, I guess, how they were going, to move the camera a lot in shots, how much incredibly challenging was sort of, the challenges behind trying to hide yourself, out of shots and all that kind of stuff.
Well, the rehearsal period, like we were just saying, that's all very well. It was very static. We were just sort of rehearsing in front of one camera with monitors. Nothing could you prepare you for the baptism of fire that was 2 moving cameras. The first day was like no other working day of my life.
Yeah.
I think it was a baptism of fire for everybody, and we decided that it was going to be a simple scene. So the first scene that you see, the 2 podlings coming into the corridor with Rian and Mira stealing the fruit from the trolley, that is the thing we did on the very first day. It was a learning curve for everybody. I mean, we were experienced puppeteers, but most of the core cast have got like 20 years puppeteering experience under their belt, so we weren't novices, but it felt like your first day. And we had notes from everywhere, working out monitors, the heights of us puppeteers to the heights of puppets in relation to the other puppets, the 2 cameras, being able to see monitors. I mean, everybody was just finding their feet. And we were in the little part of the corridor in the castle, and the one overwhelming thing I can remember is just the noise of a whole film crew just trying to find their feet. And it was just organized chaos.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it was very for yourself and a lot of puppeteers, sort of learning new things or relearning, everything you've learned, from over the 20 years, and with Age of Resistance, it was sort of like just a massive change in the way you would puppeteer, I guess. Yeah.
Nothing could all that 20 years, very little of that could have prepared you for what the Dark Crystal was. It gave you an instinct, which is wonderful, but Louis and Eric changed the whole dynamic nature of it all and brought this lovely movement to it, which is wonderful. And when you watch it, it's fantastic. But when you're a puppeteer and you're used to working like the original film, it's usually quite static, quite theatrical, quite storytelling, simple storytelling, which is lovely. But the guys just mixed it up and changed it. And we all got used to it. It's just mind-blowing, because you get so used to watching one monitor, and then you'd look and you go, there's another camera there, and you catch yourself in the other shot, and then you would readjust, because puppets are so specific with their eye lines, and you dress to one, and then suddenly to notice there's another camera there. You go, oh, well, what did I look like on that camera? Was I right? Was I wrong? So you're constantly not only trying to deliver the performance, but you're evaluating whether it's working on both shots. So it's like your mind's almost already in 2 places. It's like in a third and fourth place. So it's quite a lot to get your head around.
And I guess, was that something I guess during filming, you'd have access to be able to like play back, all the different takes just to see how you went.
We did sometimes have playback, and you could easily go and watch a monitor. I mean, the thing was, it was so intense, and there was. Luke says, I've heard him say, like, every shot was a headache. Every shot there was something to work out. And he's not wrong. I mean, everything was a technical, physical riddle. Every shot. Just simple. And especially when you're tied into a set and you're locked in or you're through a hole, or it was very hard to go out and watch things. But we could go and watch things and reevaluate. But sometimes it was almost,
just didn't have the time. You just got to keep pushing through the day. Yeah.
And almost it was too hard psychologically to separate yourself from what you've done that day. Because it was all so in the moment what we were doing, and it was all heightened senses. So to then sit back and just watch it in the cold light of day where you're just looking at it was actually quite hard to flip your brain into just viewing it. It's very hard just to view it. And even now when you watch the series back, it's very hard to remove yourself from it. So watch it, you'll go, oh, I remember that day that happened, and that was where we had to do that. Oh, and that looks I look uncomfortable there. You can't see I look uncomfortable, but I know that that's uncomfortable. And I remember I was against a piece of set, or that was a very hard walk to come through there. So you can never remove yourself from it. You can never just watch it. Yeah, I tended not to watch much playback.
Okay, yeah, no. I just curious. I mean, I guess how pretty much every day was just a challenge to get through. I mean, what was like one of the most sort of challenging scenes, that shot like for your roles with Age of Resistance?
There were so many things that we did that brought their own unique sort of difficulty to them, or intensity. When you were playing emotional scenes, there was the whole emotion and the acting you had to bring to it. And with Rian, I almost felt like there was two gears of performance. There was the emotional stuff, the intense stuff, and then there was the physical stuff. So there would be, the sword play and the stunts and the dropping down a rope. So, but with Rian, the most sort of intense sort of scene that I remember is the scene where he goes to Mordrefara to explain what's happened, and she doesn't believe him, and his father comes in, and who he hopes is going to believe him, and he doesn't. That was a very intense scene. And on a personal level, that scene was also intense because it was Dave Goelz to me is a god amongst puppeteers. And I'd never met him, and never thought I'd ever work with him. And he was playing Baffy at the
Fizzgig, yeah. Which, of course, I mean, for any of the listeners, that Dave Goelz, I mean, he's one of the legend puppeteers, like from the Muppets, and but also, I mean, with the Dark Crystal, he performed Fizzgig with the original movie. So it's kind of cool to actually, see. To heard from him, reprising, doing puppeteering a Fizzgig, yeah.
And the Garthin Master. I mean, everybody remembers the Chamberlain because of his and the Chamberlain was a fantastic role, but the Garthin Master really was the main Skeksis. I mean, he becomes the Emperor, and he's got a lot of the lines. So really, he's the main Skeksis in the film. So to be working next to Dave Goelz was just... So I remember feeling... It was one of the days where I actually felt physically sick because there was all the lines to remember, the emotional aspect of the scene, and it was all day. And 3 foot away from me was Dave Goelz and the lovely Louise Gold. And I go, well, I'm working now amongst people who inspired me. And how do you do that? And it's this big, intense scene, which then goes on to be incredibly physical in the sense that, the sword fighting, he goes and he chops the shit. So it was an ordinary the office for Rian. It was, and that was a big, and I'm very proud of how that scene's come out. There's a real emotion and intensity to it. But when I watch it, it's also a very precious memory to me because that was a true highlight of my career so far. It was very special, very special indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a great scene. I mean, I actually remember watching the trailer and seeing that shot of Rian, cutting the rope and flying up, with the rope, up, escaping the stone and the wood. And I remember just being blown away by that shot. It was just just one of the incredible moments in the show. But yeah, definitely. I mean, the intensity of just the dramaticness of that scene with him and Mordra Farah and then with his father coming along in the scene, and I could definitely that's just such a one of the many moments like from the show.
It's one of those twist and turn scenes where you think it's one thing and it twists, and she doesn't believe him, and then his father doesn't believe him. The one person who he feels he can turn to, he doesn't believe him. So he's literally then surrounded and on his own. He is standing on it. It's a real. And when I watch it, it goes really quick.
Oh yes, yeah.
But it was, and I remember when we filmed it, there was very much an air in the room. And it was exhausting because I had my arm up all day trying to do this very intense stuff. And there'd just be times where I had to say, can I just put my arm down for 5 minutes? But normally there's a bit of banter in between, when someone's resting or something like that. But it was there was a hush in the room, like, this is quite an intense. And it was like, I was like, for God's sake, someone make a joke.
Just to lighten the mood,
And I think Dave, I don't know what he must have felt, but coming in on a day like that, which was such a big emotional day, must have been, and he was very sweet, and we had a very nice conversation after. So it was a very special day for me. Yeah,
wow. And I guess performing I might as well talk about with performing with Rian and as a Gelfling. And I guess I'll also be curious, to chat about because you perform as a Gelfling with Rian and of course the skekOk, the Skeksis, was it challenging to balance between the two roles? I mean, obviously they weren't in the same scenes together, so you sort of had that flexibility, to be able to do those two roles, based on with the shooting schedule and whatnot. But what was sort of the differences between, performing, Gelfling versus performing as a Skeksis for the show?
It's wonderful because they're two very different things. So on a performer level, in your mind, Rian is very much more intense. It's more controlled. It's more emotional. His character, I find him quite sensitive to. He's the hero, so that's very much one sort of character. And then, brilliantly for your creative mind, the Skeksis then are so bad, wonderful. It's like I get to play. Not only do I get to play the hero role, then I get to play a villain.
Yes, yeah.
And I think any actor will tell you that the joy of playing a villain or a baddie is a wonderful thing to do. To get to play the hero is wonderful, but with a baddie, there's a lot more meat on your bone to bite into, and so it was very nice to have the two sides of your brain stimulated by the two characters, and it was nice that they were so different because they've got different heartbeats, different pulses, and different motivations. So you get to explore not only their character, but your character within those. Then all of us as a goodie and a baddie on each shoulder, and you get to bring those out and you get to play with those toys. But physically, they couldn't be really more different as I think about it. As a Gelfling, they are obviously a lot smaller. They're still heavy.
Yeah.
They're smaller, so you have your own physical presence when you're working with the Gelfling. So you hold them above your head, but when you bring them down, you're still in your own world. You're amongst set. You can see your fellow puppeteers. You can communicate easily with your assistants and your colleagues who you're acting with. So you have your own physical nature, and you've got your peripheral vision, which you rely so much on a puppeteer. I think as a puppeteer, when you're performing, you do so much through your peripheral vision because you're watching two monitors. You can't just watch one monitor, you've got to watch two.
Watch two, yes, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes a third. And then when you're, say, handling props, and you have to be aware of your physical presence on the set, so how close you are to your fellow performers and how you all logistically fit into that jigsaw is so much easier when you're a Gelfling. When you are a Skeksis,
Yeah.
the peripheral vision goes. You are enclosed in a duvet. It's like performing your bed as a kid.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The duvet. And so you no longer have your peripheral vision. You no longer communicate well with the outside world, because we used to have an earpiece in where you would be fed your fellow performers' dialogue, and you'd also have an open talk back to your team, so the people who'd be doing your eyes. Not only then are you in a bed in the dark with no peripheral vision, you also then have someone shoved up your armpit.
Yeah, so yeah.
So
and they're like performing the other arm, because I mean,
yes,
because you're in the body, and then you use. Are you left or right-handed at it? Like
I'm right-handed.
You're right-handed. Yeah. So your right hand, to do the head, and then you have someone underneath your armpit
doing the right arm.
Doing the right arm. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Doing the left arm.
Yeah, because you do. Yeah. Because you're right-handed. You have right hand on the head. The left hand, doing the left hand of the Skeksis, and yeah.
And when you see that carab, I can't remember to say the word. The carapace, is that the word? Yeah. On the back of the Skeksis, that's roughly where your head is. So that's roughly where the puppeteer's head is. So, and then the first thing that gets you is the heat.
Yes. Yeah.
When you first Skeksis, they're quite cool, but then you've got two people's body heat underneath the two duvet things. So suddenly there just becomes a point where you get hot, and from that point on, they do not cool down, and they retain the heat. And the number of times you'd be performing and the sweat would be dripping off your face, and I have to wear glasses, and then water would drip into your glasses, and then it would drip from your glasses that would then fall off your face onto the monitor, which you then sweat off. You might have to kindly say to your assistant, "Can you wipe the sweat off the monitor?" And then you've also got your acting to do. You've got the dialogue to think about. You've got to watch your two cameras. And then also within the Skeksis, we had a third camera, which used to be often mounted high in the set, so you could physically see yourself.
Yeah, so a bird's eye view, I guess.
A bird's eye view, indeed. Because as a Skeksis, as I say, you have no peripheral vision. You can't just look to your left and go, "Oh, well, they're there." So if I step back a little bit, you only have the two shots that you can see. And when you work to a monitor is a 2D image. You lose all sense of depth. So any puppeteer will tell you when they're handling a prop or anything like that, it's very hard to do just looking at the monitor, because you've got no depth of field. So you might think you're reaching for it, but 3 inches away from it in reality. So you have to glance in the real world just to double check that you're going to hit your mark. You can't do that in a Skeksis. So that's why the God camera was so important. But it would fry your brain. It fried my brain, and I think it fried the others. To then suddenly you have to, with all of that, then plot your geography on another monitor. And just the communication thing became very hard when you had a lot of sound. And the other thing that made the Skeksis difficult was when we got hot, they would bring in fans to cool us down.
Yeah, for each
take,
so yeah.
And the lovely dressers that look after you, suddenly the costume would be flung open at the side.
Yeah.
And air blasted, and then you'd hear on your sound earpiece all the other fans coming on multiply at the same time with your other Skeksis. So it was like this whirlwind. But then with the Gelfling, you did always have like a wind machine following you. Like Rian, I know like these famous stars often have a light that follows them. Rian had a wind machine.
Yeah.
Constantly followed him. So you always have the sound of a fan on set. But yeah, there were very two different types of, and the Gelfling puppeteering is from a very more subtle palette. Obviously, the critique of one of the things about the original film was the realistic nature of the Gelfling and whether that was successful or not. So we were left with that legacy with our Gelfling, and it was a very subtle palette that we had to hit. Whereas with the Skeksis, they are the villains. They can be slightly more. They can be slightly more evil. They can be slightly more what we're used to seeing the puppets do well, and that's over-accentuated performance and fantastic characters.
Was sort of like the final episode, the whole battle with the Skeksis versus a Gelfling, was that probably like the most challenging like scenes to shoot, like as a Skeksis for the show?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had the armor. That was the first thing. So the armor increased the weight. The Skeksis were heavy. They were heavy beasts, hot beasts. And we shot that during the summer, so it was very hot on set. So there was the heat to contend with, but also they had the armor, which increased the weight of the Skeksis by a fair old whack. So that made it more challenging. And then the other thing that was also challenging is there was lots of sticky out bits on that armor, and as fantastic as it looked, and it did look fantastic, we'd often get stuck to each other.
Oh, no.
Because the moment you turn, suddenly your turning circle is not just you, it's 3 or 4 foot of armor behind you that's got lots of spiky bits with lots of soft, lacy costumes. So we'd often get tangled within each other. And of course, there was a lot of us on set at the time. So that's once there's more than 4 or 5 Skeksis on set, and it becomes a big feat of just people management. And of course we had all the explosions, and they got through bags and bags and bags of soil that used to go into these things. So you'd be and there'd be all these explosions going off, boom, bang, and all this stuff would rain down on you, and you got to remember your lines again, and you got to move, and it was great fun.
Yeah, because I was just thinking just about like the battle scenes, and I mean, I guess because you're playing both roles, as skekOk and then Rian, that they're both. I mean, they're sort of in the same location. So like, would you just spend like sort of like days as as a Skeksis, and then do the next following days like as Rian to perform like the rest of those scenes, or was it actually a constant? Yeah.
A juggle. We'd turn around and we'd do one side of the battle. So we'd have stand-ins do like the shots where you see over the Gelfling shoulders looking at the Skeksis. I would be in the Scroll Keeper then, and someone would be standing in for Rian and the other Gelfling there, because obviously so there'd be Alice and Ollie and Dave and Warwick, who obviously were playing Gelfling on the other side of the battle, and Kevin. So we'd have stand-ins then, and then we would be in the Skeksis, and then it would swap. So we'd spend a couple of days looking that way, a couple of days looking the other way.
And I mean, I'd have to say, like, one of the funny moments, of course, I mean, this was recently on with the bloopers of the Dark Age of Resistance, and I think there was one moment where you had the jewel glaive and you're going to put it into the blue flame, and then it snapped off, and
yeah, that wasn't in any prophecy, was it?
No.
The jewel snapped.
Yeah.
About this battle, right? Yeah. Well, I've only got one half. Well, I've got 1.5 bits of it, but I've got all of it.
Yeah.
That was it, not as robust as you thought it was. The jewel blade.
No.
I did feel bad because someone spent a lot making that thing, but there were multiple.
Of course,
jewel blades.
Yeah.
There wasn't just one.
No.
But I did feel bad briefly.
Yeah. just for that little moment. Yeah.
Pretended to feel guilty.
Yeah.
Whilst laughing internally.
Yes. Yeah. But no, that's. I mean that. I guess that's filmmaking. Just the things that you learn. Throughout the shoot, and all these mistakes. But of course, the end result. We don't. The audience. We don't see any of those things. So,
No.
And
until they release
the bloopers, of course. Yeah. I sort of have to mention about that moment between you and Deke, singing. I guess a parody. I mean, with the Phantom of the Opera. I mean, that was such one of my favorite moments, sort of thing. Just to go a little bit off topic for just a second.
We did. I mean, although the Age of Resistance was incredibly intense and pressure like no other puppetry or life experience you've ever had before, we did have a lot of fun. And I'm a very playful person, I think. And you couldn't have got through that show if you weren't allowed to play. And Louis was also a very playful person and quite cheeky. So we did have a lot of fun, a lot of giggles amongst the tears.
Yes, yeah.
We did.
Yeah, I mean,
we did laugh.
amongst like all the hard work that that everyone worked on the show. I mean, you definitely got to have those like lighthearted moments just to have fun as well.
It's a chance to let off steam and a very precious release. I mean, I remember we were doing one scene, and it's where Redhead Paladin is telling the other Gelfling about the dream fasting experience he's had with Rian, and explaining about Mira's death and who's responsible. And there was just something that day that was very funny, and really, as you would write it down, it wouldn't seem funny at all. But it was just like this wonderful release of, and we were crying, absolutely crying with laughter. And I think it's because we were working so intense, and there was so much pressure on everybody, that the how we laughed was also equally as intense. And I remember we just cried and cried and cried, and we didn't know whether we were going to get through it. And it was something so silly. I think it was the pronunciation of a word, and it just was a trigger. And we were just, but they're very precious memories, within the puppetry thing. It's being with the people, and the core team we're like a little family. We're like people who have survived a battle, and only we know what it was like to be in that battle, and we don't have to say much because we all went through it. And we had some wonderful assistant puppeteers who were so supportive, and it was it's a lovely, precious time to be with those people and go through that experience with everybody. And a lot of those people we've known a long time, so it's very precious, happy memories.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just a journey that you and the puppeteers and all the crew just going through the whole year of shooting the show. And I mean, the end result was just just unlike anything. And I guess when you watch the show for the first time or a couple of times, like, was there particular like moments like from the show that I mean, at the time of filming, you're like, oh, I'm curious how this is going to turn out. Was there any moments where you're just like, you're not too sure how it's turned out, but then when you saw it, you're just like, oh, wow, that was something.
I think maybe it's hard to think of a bit or a moment, but I think the whole thing was slightly a revelation. I mean, I was very fortunate to get to play, do the voice of the Scroll Keeper too. So I was aware of how Louis was cutting the show, because we had chance to watch rough cuts of the show to sort of prepare us for the ADR. So I was aware of what was happening, but of course then to see the final piece with all the spit and polish on it, I don't think nothing could prepare you for how it turned out. I often feel at the time we kind of knew what Louis wanted. We trusted him. We knew it was hard work, and we knew he was pushing us beyond where we would naturally want to be. But we knew he had a bigger vision than what we could see technically on that day. He had to, and I feel like we were his paint box. Like, we didn't quite know what picture he was painting, but it was our duty to give him the best paint, and that he got the best set, the best lighting that he could for him to tell this story. And we would not accept second best. We wanted to give what he needed, although it was killing us and killing him. I think we didn't want him to be short. Mm-hmm. Of course, the constraints of time and budget all on our shoulders. I mean, I don't know how he coped with the pressure of that whole production on him and shooting all of that, but we did not want to let him down. So when you see, I mean, there'll be times where you spent a lot of time doing one thing and it hasn't made the cut, but you can't say, oh, well, that's not, how can he cut? We're not in charge of that greater picture, and he's the man who has to tell that whole story. So you might not use all of the paint, but you've got to make sure that paint was there for him to use. So, he's created, as the original film, another incredible, work of art. I mean, with Brian Froud and Wendy and Toby and their work, and the set design, and the lighting that Eric gave, the character design. I mean, what wonderful paints to work with. I mean, It's a gift. It's a creative person's gift. And what's wonderful now is to see, when I glance on social media, and all the art that is being inspired. And I've thought a lot about that, going back to our previous conversation about myself being inspired by the Dark Crystal. And you see this new wave of inspiration. And I go, well, what's special about the Dark Crystal? Because that world is manufactured and made and created, and nothing exists without it being made. It's not like a normal film with actors in.
Yeah, and I guess like the whole, world building, I mean, especially, with the Dark Crystal, that everything had to be handmade. There wasn't like you can just go, you can buy things, from prop department, or, everything had to be made from scratch.
Everything is a minor work of art. And even the CG, I mean, I think we don't tend to value CG as highly as we should, but even that is made especially for, and like, as I was saying, like a normal film, you watch actors, but the thing, because that whole world is created, people want to replicate that in some way, I think. And I think that's what suddenly instills that artistic, I've seen people draw in their own Gelfling now, and it's because they want to replicate that. They want to be part of it, but they don't know. Whereas an actor, you can perhaps, you could go and teach acting, or you could learn acting, or you could go and join a drama group, or you could, but you can't do that with the Dark Crystal. The stars are made. They are made. So how do you suddenly make something like that? Oh, and that might inspire some little mind out there. Oh, it's a puppet. Now, how do I make a puppet? And there begins that creative journey again. And that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, and I think like it's going to be, really interesting. Because with Age of Resistance, that was sort of, really a big leap in puppetry. The way that, puppet productions can be filmed. It's going to be interesting to see, where it takes us, say, in 10 or 20 years' time, just what will be the next level up in the world of puppetry, yeah.
I think it's very much a scale thing, actually, that is quite different. Really, when you think about the Gelfling and the Skeksis, as Lisa has said, it is really kind of old technology. There's not really much new that we've invented. It's the other side that is different. The fact that Louis used moving cameras and used two cameras. It's that storytelling and the scale. I think that's what's more different, because, as Lisa says in the Crystal Calls, there's nothing been of the scale since the original film, really, since world building and that creation. So I think will we see, and I think Dark Crystal really owes a little bit to the new Star Wars films, in the sense that they wanted something more tangible rather than three-dimensional, something. Everything physical has a presence, and I think there was a thirst for that. And I think that's what started with The Force Awakens, that people were brave enough to want physical creatures again. And I think Dark Crystal owes a little bit to that renaissance. I don't think it quite would have happened without that initial tip from Star Wars that we want something more tangible.
I guess very similar to what happened, of course, with the original Star Wars, but also more so with The Empire Strikes Back, and how, of course, Wendy Mardiner and Frank Oz, Frank Oz puppeteered Yoda, and Wendy, got involved with making the molds of Yoda, and sort of the success of that character for a lot of people that watched that, with watching The Empire Strikes Back, that was sort of like a big, I guess, stepping stone that, well, if now that we've got Yoda working, we can make a world, almost full of Yodas. I think, as Frank Oz, said in an interview many years ago, just a world just full of puppets, no humans. And I think, that was sort of, I guess, a stepping stone of, okay, we can make Dark Crystal a reality. And again, sort of went full circle with a lot of puppeteers that worked on Dark Crystal ended up working on Return of the Jedi. So, yeah, I guess, in a way that, Force Awakens sort of influence, I guess, going back to practical effects, with puppets and creatures and performances, all that kind of stuff. And I think, that's probably, I guess in a way, helped the Dark Crystal sort of come back in the big way that it has.
I think so. I think the wonderful thing about Yoda and is such a fantastic, solid performance. And I think that's something that animation and CG is a performance, and their work is incredible. I'm not saying that it's not. It's beautiful work. But to the speed they work at, I think a performance is a lot more thought about. It's almost like it's so microscopic. It's looked at so closely. Like every movement is orchestrated because of the speed of the process. Whereas with puppetry, there's something a little bit more raw about it. There's a little bit more of an energy because it happens in the moment. And as well as them being physically there, so not only do you have the physical presence of an object, because let's face it, they are just foam and fabric and resin and synthetic hair, and you know, they are just an object, but they are an object that is three-dimensional and therefore has an energy. And then if you put a performance, a raw, visceral sort of puppetry, visceral energy into them, that performance is there of the moment. And like I think I've heard Louis say that, you know, everything goes up to that moment. There's all that creation in the workshop, the set, and it's just this very fleeting, tangible moment where that all comes together and you just capture that moment. And all of that's building up to that second where you just get that look from that one puppet, that interaction between these two objects, these two puppets, but you put human energy into it physically, and you just get something. You just get a magic.
Yeah, it just makes a big difference. And with yourself, like with moving the characters, I mean, I think that was one thing that you talked about in the documentary, The Crystal Calls, how that the way you puppeteered Rian is that you always had him constantly moving, like in each, you know, with shots or scenes, that sort of thing. So that was just something you put your stamp, I guess, like with Rian.
Puppets are a trick. They are an illusion in many ways. They can't do all that we can, and I think the audience does put quite a lot of themselves to what they see. And I think puppetry is very much like an ink blot in a folded page that you crease and you fold the page, you open it up, and I ask you, what do you see? And you can only really provide that ink blot. And what your audience then takes from it is quite personal. And so with Rian, you can, with the Gelfling, I suppose, you just have to give them a heartbeat and an energy and try and be as realistic as you can. And part of Rian was just, and with all puppets, is especially at this level of trying to create reality, a sense of reality, is to give them a weight and a gravity and a breath. And within that, as human beings, we rarely are still. And if a puppet is still, it suddenly looks quite dead. You suddenly realise that it is quite lifeless. So within all your puppet characters and with all the puppets you ever do, you have to give them a sort of a tick or a heartbeat and as a breath, as I say. And with Rian, I'd always have him sort of shifting his weight on his feet. Just a constant movement, just so he was never still. Because I think as soon as he's still, I mean, they're very beautiful to look at. So, I mean, that's a blessing in themselves. And the Skeksis are beautiful to look at. I mean, you're fed with your eyes, with them being still. But you do, but it doesn't have to be much. It has to be very subtle. And those lovely scenes that Rian does with Mira and Deet and Auden, you know, those lovely moments that are very much slower, and you get to really think about your movement and an emotion and a stillness without being still. It's lovely to get that kind of work, because all the other puppet stuff I've done has been for children's television, and that's a very different palette, you know, and it's over accentuated. Everything is accentuated. It's a supernatural, super real, overcompensating performance with children's television puppets. But where do you get to play a death in your working day as a puppeteer? Do you get to die?
Yeah.
You know, like with Tavra, I mean, you know, the fact that she is stabbed and she is dying and she eventually dies. I mean, where have you played that before? You then have to rely so much on your acting instinct. But again, with Tavra, it's I tended to play my characters, bring that animation right down, let the audience put what they want upon it, give it a breath. And within the stillness of Tavra's performance, there's not an awful lot of movement, but there's just enough to guide you on that journey. And if you watch the sound off, you'd still communicate that same motion. I think that's the test of good puppetry. It's a bit weird to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, if you turn the sound off and you just watch the physical storytelling, and if the puppets can do that without sound, that is good stuff. And it's funny, as puppeteers, especially with children's characters, you litter your performance with noises. Like if you watch a puppet, they'll constantly be going, there's constant noise because it's a way of bringing your performance up. With what you can't do physically, you kind of do with your voice. So for Dark Crystal, when we knew that was not going to be our thing, and we're going to have these very talented actors and actresses putting on the voice, it was like a thing taken out of our arsenal, really. So that's why it's quite nice when you do watch it and it does work, and you can see and you can relax in that lovely palette that you get. The Dark Crystal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was such one of the big moments from the show, like with the death of Tavra and her with her sisters. It was such a great moment. Like it was a sad moment as well. With the show, and I guess like with puppetry, of course, like you were pretty involved in the post production, being able to voice some characters, and of course one of which that you performed, skekOk, the Scroll Keeper. You actually got to voice the character.
To get to do the Scroll Keeper's voice was a real blessing, a real honour. I'm very humbled by it and feel very privileged to do my own. It's one thing to puppeteer on the Dark Crystal, but then to have the gift of being then able to do the voice. And with the Scroll Keeper, I mean, I just enjoyed myself. So really it was, I just thought, well, I'm getting to play this thing that I've always wanted to do. I never thought I'd ever do, but fate has so that I can, and I'm going to enjoy this. And so really I was entertaining myself when I was doing him, just enjoying myself. I mean, although it was incredibly hard work, so the voice was just what I thought because in the film he hardly speaks at all. You really don't get much number of what he is. So I kind of just did what I wanted to do. And I don't think I consciously thought about it too much. I thought of a few tics that I might do, but it was just in part of my enjoyment. And I thought, this voice sort of, as a puppeteer, you always do when you get your puppet, you look at the thing and you go, well, what does this thing sound like? And of course, there's an element of yourself within every character you do. So what am I pulling out of my box to put into him? And so I just enjoyed myself, and then started to get a sense that it wasn't said outright to me, but there was intonation that we do really like your voice. And but I knew what the deal was. I wasn't expecting to play the Scroll Keeper, and that would have been by me. And but after we wrapped and a few weeks in, they said, "Oh, well, we'll be speaking to you." I thought, "Oh." And so I was very lucky to do the ADR, which you think would be a little more simple, judging that there was no physicality.
Yes, yeah.
But everything with the Dark Crystal, it was hard work. You'd think replacing your own dialogue would not be as hard as you think, but it was hard, and you would come out of the 4-hour sessions, like Mark Hamill has said and Jason Isaacs has said, quite exhausted. I spent a whole day screaming as the Scroll Keeper, just screaming.
just doing different takes of screaming, high pitch or just lots of, I guess, variations And I mean, this is all to benefit, really. I mean, the editors to pick the really good ones. But of course, I mean, you're doing it against, you're watching this show and it's sort of a lot of things, I guess, because you're making sure that, your performance is in sync to what you're seeing on the video, but also, just so many different layers to it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, they did. I remember before when we knew it was all going to be, the voice was going to be replaced. And in my experience, I've seen it done well before. I've seen it done badly before, quite a few times. So I was very worried. And hats off to Taran and everyone involved. They did every breath. And what was reassuring for me, thank goodness, that when I went to do the ADR for myself, and and I did a lot of ADR with Jeff Addis, wonderful Jeff. But you would go, oh, the scorekeeper just moves his mouth a little bit in that frame there. We just need a sound for there.
Yes, yeah.
Spend 5 minutes just do, well, what is that noise that he's doing there? Is that a or a or a What noise is that? So when I saw the love and the care and the detail again, so not only the visual care, but then there was the audio, the care that we went into the. Suddenly, all my worry of that was dispelled, and when you see the final piece and you see all the voices in the right place, it works so well. And of course, as the puppeteers, we did lock these actors down, really, which is no easy feat for them, because it's like acting with your hands in. It's like trying to do sign language with handcuffs on.
Yeah.
And it's because, again, like saying, watching the puppetry without the sound on. Obviously, that came before any of the ADR happened. So you are physically locked in, and all the puppeteers did, the acting that you see. But then the actors have to come and emulate that, try and give a little bit more of their energy into it. But their hands are sort of tied into what we did. But they did a magnificent job. For us, it's a little strange when we see it without our voices. On first watch, you go, oh, that voice. Oh, okay, that one. So, I can't hear, say, Ollie, or I can't hear Dave, or I can't hear Helena. Oh, okay. So that was a little journey of adventure when we all watched it. But yeah, fantastic job. The care was there.
Yeah, I mean, it was just an incredible show. It was just, unlike any other show, and just a lot of moments. I mean, for myself, I was just, my mind was just blown away. It's and so much happening within each episode of the show. Yeah, it was just such an incredible moment. Just watching it all, and I mean, a big thanks to yourself and a lot of the people who worked on the show, for making it all happen, and just losing the suspension of disbelief and just going back to the world of Thra once again.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that it's people out there and enjoy it, and they can see the work. And it really was the most humbling honour of my professional life to do this, and to have the opportunity to do what I did. It was a gift, and to have lovely feedback, and to know that it gives so much people a lot of happiness, and that people can get lost in that world that everybody created, the hundreds of people created. That's a real compliment to us all, and it's received with a big heart.
Absolutely, yeah. And who knows? Fingers crossed for a season 2 if it happens. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So again,
the one about season 2 is season 1. We didn't know what we were letting ourselves in for.
Yeah.
Season 2,
you'd be more prepared. Yeah.
We'll have to gird our loins for season 2 if it happens.
Yeah.
Okay, season 2.
Yeah. Here we go again.
Salts now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Neil, I just want to say, again, thank you so much for your time, for being on the show and chatting about your experiences working on Age of Resistance. And I guess, how can the listeners, find out more about your work, or how they can reach out to you?
If they really want to find me,
yeah.
I've just set up a little Instagram account, so which is Neil Sterenberg Puppeteer. So if people just want to look in and see anything I'm up to, I will try and be good and put pictures, and people can reach out to me there if they want to. And I'll try and put some nice things on there for people. But yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah, on Instagram. Okay, and of course, yeah.
Instagram.
and of course, like, we'll put the link in the show notes. So if anyone wants to follow all your going ons with the world of puppetry and of course with Age of Resistance, they can do so. So again, yeah, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolute pleasure, Phil. Thank you very much for asking me. It's been great. Thank you.
Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal podcast, is a production of 3 Point Edit. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. If you'd like to know more about the podcast, visit our website at www.darkcrystalpodcast.com. Thank you so much and stay tuned for the next episode of Trial by Stone.